All right, I'm going to call the July 11th meeting of the Planning Board to order. At this time, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This time I'm going to ask for any disqualifications on the old business in front of us. Hearing none, we do have a quorum. We have 5 out of 7 members, so that is a quorum. I'm going to ask for a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, that's passed. Item 5 is the approval of the minutes from our June 13th, 2023 meeting. If you've had a chance to glance over that, this time I'm going to entertain a motion to approve the minutes from June 13th, 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from June 13th.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're going to move on to old business. Do I need to move that up on the screen, Tammy?
I am.
There you, thank
There
you.
you go. Thank you.
All right.
I was taking minutes.
That's-
Sorry, I'm
Oh,
multitasking.
no, we'll just move, at least we just have one item, so
Yes.
we'll move kind of slow. All right, old business, Planning Board, PB 23-11, James Dalton Mims III, request for an amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapters 1, 3, 4, 7, and 10, to change minimum lot sizes, density, and environmental protection sections. At this time, we'll hear from staff.
Staff is at your ready. This is a continuation from the last meeting. You asked for additional time to give you extra time to review it. We made our presentation last month, as did
So
Mr.
just
Mims.
general questions
Yep,
directed at staff.
so if you have any questions
Okay.
for us, we'll be happy to answer those.
Okay,
We
what,
did include the presentation in case you wanted to see anything that we had presented last month. You have your worksheet in front of you in case that'll help you some.
yeah, what I did is I gave the board members an outline, and Mr. Kemp did as well. I think it's important, if we categorize things, one thing to note is items 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10, and 14 all deal with minimum lot sizes. And staff's response to those items are basically the same. Now, point of order, we have some people in the audience today. Do I need to, because I've never handled a meeting like this where it's not as formal, do I need to give them a chance to speak?
That's entirely up to you because you didn't close the public session last time. We
Okay.
kind of just left it open. So
Okay,
that's
So
entirely.
the public session is open. So if anybody is signed up to speak, please come forward, because that will help us with and state your name and your address, and then we may direct questions at you, but this is going to be a little more informal than a normal meeting would be with new cases.
Okay. James Mims III, 105 Chestnut's my address. Did you just want me here for questions, or can I spew what I have today? Won't be long.
Yeah, go ahead and give your, well, you've got a beard this time, don't you?
I,
That's why I didn't recognize you.
little bit. Even my son was giving me a hard look today, so.
Hey, all right.
So, you know, as a whole, I just want y'all as a group to look at a few things. Obviously, there's not much of an audience, right? So that makes it harder for an approval to probably take place with a little less audience or less people looking upon this. But what I want you guys to understand is I looked at some data, and the Imagine Currituck survey was done with about 1,700 citizens that participated. And that's how, what I was told is that's how the board or the planning department wrote the land use plan, was just 1,700 surveys. And that was where the direction for the land use plan came about. I wrote a petition, and to my part, I'll take the hit. I did not walk door to door. I did not email people individually. But what I did is, there was a small group of people, probably 10, that just reached out through Facebook and got a petition signed by 156 members of our community. Had I emailed this out, walked door to door, done any of those things, I think we would have had this is off of conspiracy, we would have had a much greater number of participation. This was simply by a Facebook post, and this was asking for the very same, if not more stringent, and that was just based on the density that I put forward with the text amendment. But this petition was signed by 156 people. And I want you to imagine this room being full of the people that would have signed this petition or just didn't see it, or are part of our community that truly believe that these are solutions to real hard problems that we have in this county. What I do want to talk about today, importantly to me, is the building of townhomes and apartments, specifically where I asked to remove the MXR district. Building townhomes in rural communities can present certain challenges and drawbacks. Here are some reasons why it may be seen as a negative idea. The loss of rural character. Rural communities are often valued for their open spaces, natural landscapes, and slower pace of life. Introducing townhomes can alter the rural character and charm, potentially leading to the loss of distinct qualities that make these communities attractive. Strain on infrastructure. Rural areas generally have limited infrastructure and services compared to the urban or suburban areas. Introducing townhomes can place additional demands on roads, utilities, schools, and other public services that may not be adequately prepared to handle the increased population density, much like we're seeing today. Environmental impacts. Building townhomes in rural areas may require clearing natural landscapes, impacting local ecosystems and wildlife habitats. Increased development can also lead to issues related to stormwater management, loss of agricultural land, and disruption of natural resources. Loss of agricultural land. Rural areas often have a strong agricultural heritage. Converting land for townhome developments can result in the loss of valuable agricultural resources, affecting the local food supply, farming economy, and overall sustainability of the community. Townhomes can also cause a shift in community dynamics. Introducing townhomes can bring a different demographic and lifestyle that may not align with the existing rural community. This can lead to a change in social dynamics, cultural practices, and community cohesion. Increased traffic and congestion. Higher population density resulting from townhomes can lead to increased traffic and congestion on rural roads, which were originally designed for lower volumes. This can impact the safety, the quality of life, and the overall rural experience that we had right here in Currituck County. It's important to consider the unique characteristics and needs of this rural community when making development decisions. Local planning, community engagement, and thoughtful land use policies can help strike a balance between accommodating growth, preserving rural heritage, and maintaining the quality of life that our residents deserve. And with that, I ask that you approve these text amendments, as these are real, true solutions to problems that we have right here at home. And that's all I have for tonight.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Mims from the board? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else signed up to speak? All right. Now, at this time, we can go ahead and start directing questions to staff. Again, what we've tried to do, Kevin actually did this did a summary of proposed text amendments for this case. And as you can see, he designated each item separately, and then just did a quick summary of what that is. And I think as I said, it's important to know that items 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10, and 14, I believe, have to do with lot sizes. And staff's response to all of those items is identical. Basically, their response is that you control growth not just with lot size, but with density requirements. So I want to make that clear on those items. Item 4 is simply no new MXR rezoning. And then the old MXR rezoning would be considered a legacy rezoning, a legacy district. Item 5 and 6 really, I believe, go together, I think. They have to do with the CC district, the community center district. One is deleting, item 5 is simply deleting the community center district, district-specific development standards. And then item 6 is deleting community center substandards. Now, Tammy, those two seem to go together. Can you give me a little more detail on those two items?
And since they're different sections of the ordinance, we just had to break it up into two different items.
Okay, but
they
it's
do go
still the
together.
same type of,
They do go together.
okay. Item 7 is layout of dwelling lots and subdivisions to be evenly distributed, I believe, and that's what Kevin, dwelling units may not be concentrated in planned development districts. You just worded it a little bit different than I did, but it's the same thing, right? Item 7?
Yes, it's the same principle. It's just, that's the way it's worded in the ordinance. There's a section that says, right now, that gives a choice where the lots can be evenly spaced or concentrated. And what this would do would remove the concentration option
And
to
things would
that.
just be evenly distributed through.
It would then
through
read, lots in a planned development must be evenly distributed.
all acre lots, all close to the same proximity from each other, all with similar setbacks,
Correct.
that type of thing. Okay.
Yes.
Item 11, we don't have to talk about, I believe. Staff approves that. Now, items 12 and 13 is something we can certainly discuss. It has to do with open space definition, set-asides, including the 404 wetlands, and item 13, fill not be allowed in any 404 wetlands. And then item 15, we really have no issues with that. So at this time, I'm gonna ask the board to direct any questions to staff or any type of discussion between the board members.
Ms. Glave, just wondered, you're recommending approval for items 5, 6, and 11? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
And a portion of 12.
Right.
And 15.
Okay. So staff's recommending, as David said, 5, 6. Can you go into a little detail, just informally, why you would agree with Mr. Mims on that? To go ahead and.
Sure, if you go to the motion sheet, it gives you a little more detail, but items 5 and 6 are removing that community center zoning district. There's no property currently with that zoning district. It's a much more dense zoning district that had a purpose when it was thought about, when the ordinance was rewritten many years ago. That didn't come to fruition. So we don't need to create a legacy district or anything because there's no property with that zoning district.
Okay.
So it makes sense to remove that section of the ordinance.
Okay, all right, easy enough.
The item 11, the next section on that motion sheet, talks about removing the density bonus of 1 unit per acre for using sustainable development practices. Staff agrees with that. And what developers do is say they're gonna put in, let's say, Energy Star appliances. There's a selection in the ordinance that you can choose a certain number of items and you get a density bonus of 1 unit per acre above that which is allowed. And most developers use that. So this would take that density bonus away. They still get other bonuses, like you can choose like to go, say, above the height as long as the fire district approves it, or some other concessions can be made for them. You just wouldn't be allowed to get that density bonus for using, for going green, basically, is what that's for. So staff definitely supports that. The item 12, the portion that staff supports is requiring wetlands. Mr. Mims suggested that they be placed in a conservation easement, so that way they're perpetually protected, forever. They're protected. Staff definitely supports that. Not allowing them in open space, we see a conflict with that because some of the wetlands in subdivisions are used for recreation for the owners. The HOA uses these, or the property owners use these. You'll see kayak launches, you'll see viewing platforms, you'll see walkways through the wetlands, those kinds of things. So those would be in open space that are maintained by the homeowners association. So it makes sense for those recreation features to be in open space and be the responsibility of the homeowners association.
Now, does this board have the ability to is that your phone?
I am so sorry.
It's all right. I thought it might have been mine. Does this board have the ability to get very specific on certain things like that? Then, in other words, if wetlands are being used for recreational facilities, boardwalks, trails, okay, that's considered an open space. However, if it's just wetlands that aren't being really done with anything, can we, I mean, I know we can't, we're just an advisory board, but we can certainly pose that question to the commissioners, right?
You can. I don't know how you quantify it. If you are, like, I'm reviewing one right now, for example, that has a kayak launch and a pier that runs through it that has a viewing platform. So are you just narrowly using that little kayak launch and narrowly using the 5-foot wide pier, or are they enjoying all the marsh that's there?
Okay.
So I don't know how you would quantify that.
Saying, yeah.
I would think that they're enjoying all the marsh that's there, but, and it would be beyond just the narrow focus of a pier and a kayak launch.
Okay, all right. But yeah, I see what you're saying on that. Yeah. Mr. Ennis, you had
Yes,
some concerns with the wetlands.
Yes.
Let's speak to that.
Can I address a question to the petitioner, Mr. Mims, please? The term wetlands, we've all talked about it, you have talked about it and so on. I'm slow, but I do get there eventually. What do you mean by the word wetlands?
What do I mean by the wetlands?
Yes, sir.
Well, most of the time, those are included in open space. They're whatever's, so when you look at a zoning map, right, they're actually classified on the zoning map where they're located and everything. I have a personal experience where the neighbor behind me or associated to me has actually filled their wetlands for, to offset some flooding that they were happening in their area. So it is commonly happening. It may not make it to this board that it's always happening, but people are really filling wetlands for development. And like I mentioned before to Mr. Dahl, or in general, to not in conversation privately, but just in general, is we actually had a member of our community that was sued for a video that circulated about a developer that was indeed filling wetlands for development, and there's no need for that.
Yeah, filling of wetlands has been going on for a long time. I remember many, many years ago in Chesapeake, just across the state line beside Bob's Fishing Hole, for example, there was a gentleman subject to a very, very serious fine because he filled wetlands. So it's nothing new. I'd actually asked you for a definition of wetlands. What do we mean by wetlands? And you gave me an example of, well, the things that get filled. There are three categories by which wetlands can be defined. And I'm sure you're familiar with these three.
I'm not going to exaggerate that. I'm not familiar with
Okay, let me
exactly what they
enlighten,
are.
please. There is hydrology, in other words, the amount of water. And wetlands can be dry for part of the year and still be defined as wetlands.
Okay.
Wetlands can be defined by their soil types, and wetlands can be defined by the vegetation that grows there. So I feel fairly confident that you and I could walk out to a field just up the road there, and I'd be able to point you right in the middle of Jimmy Ferriby's field. That's wetlands, because of some of the plants that are growing there for a multitude of reasons, that there are wetlands all over this county. And the very notion in number 11, I think it was, that you said we can't fill wetlands, I have an issue with. And this is the issue. It used to be that, I understand, and I've researched this a little bit, that their wetlands have been recognized for many, many years. And at one time, it was given to states the right to govern what happens to the wetlands. And some states went to one extreme and said, you can't do this, you can't do that. Another one said, well, please yourself. And a long, long time ago, a former president said, just enough of this silliness. We need to have some sort of standard by which everyone agrees that that is wetlands. And by God, we'll stick with it and we'll have rules which govern it. And believe it or not, that was in 1977 by President Jimmy Carter. So it's been in place for some time. And it's been monitored by the Army Corps of Engineers, which you know and I know, is run by many thousands of qualified engineers across this country. And I think the county staff will agree with me here that they run a very tight ship. They control very tightly what goes on in wetlands. They identify them very tightly. They govern their maintenance very tightly. And they're, with very little hesitation, will punish people who abuse wetlands. And so to just make the blanket statement, we're not going to allow in Currituck wetlands to be filled, it strikes me as a little strange. Are we going to usurp the responsibilities of the Army Corps? How would we do that? Would we set out somebody from the planning staff with a garden trowel and some empty food line bags for samples and a microscope so that they can make their decision and their determination of what is wetlands? I don't think so. I would suggest to you that the rules and regulations which apply to wetlands and by which appropriate permits can be obtained to fill wetlands, as they're presently governed by the Army Corps, should be left to the Army Corps. This is a process that's been evolved over many, many years. It has recently changed to allow 10,000 square feet to be filled with the appropriate permit, to an acre and a half to be filled with the appropriate permit, on condition that mitigation procedures are in place. In other words, if you, through that second permit that I mentioned, go and fill more than an acre and a half with the appropriate permit, I think it's an acre and a half, you can go ahead and fill that, but you're required through mitigation procedures to pay for the creation of 10 times as much regular land into wetlands. In other words, for every acre that you fill under that permit, you've got to buy and have created 10 acres of additional wetlands. So the purpose of my mentioning this is to highlight, the thought that, hey, we're going to stop development, we're going to stop filling the wetlands, we're going to do this, that, next with wetlands, when right now, I think it's fair to say that we don't really have a very clear idea of what wetlands are, or for that matter, how they are defined and how they're controlled. Because I would suggest to you, sir, that are very tightly controlled right now, and to add any superficial layer on top of that, which would allow supervision by county staff, is unfair to county staff and is totally inappropriate.
So you gave me an example from 1977. Yes. So I would love to ask you, from your personal opinion, do you not believe that today, you said you could take me out to a field that was, that you could show me that was probably had some wetlands on it that's now being farmed? Can you give me an example of modern day where a wetlands is being filled for a farm, or are we doing it for development, and that's the truth?
Okay, I don't dispute that it's happening today, sir. I don't dispute
For
that.
development, not for farming.
I don't dispute that for 1 minute, because it's going to happen. As I think I made the point to you, it's been happening since I recall the Bob's Hole fishing thing was 30 years ago. So I'd suggest to you, it's been going on for a long time and will probably continue to go on.
Not if you pass this amendment, it won't.
You think that would stop
this,
it?
This amendment needs to be passed, and that's to stop the inappropriate filling. The only people that are being held accountable for filling wetlands is not the developer, the ones with multitudes of money. It's me and you and my neighbors. Those are the ones that are being held accountable, not the developers.
Well, I have a serious problem with that statement, because as the county staff will approve of what I'm about to say, at least agree with what I'm about to say, is that nowadays, when any development is applied for on any scale, everything, including wetlands, has to be identified on the plat. And any future plans for it has to be identified on the plat. And I would suggest to you that the planning staff are a very conscientious outfit, I would suggest, and that they do personally go out and inspect what goes on. And in the event that wetlands were to be filled by a developer or whomever, they're going to see to it that that the action is corrected and the person is punished.
So again, that would be the reason why. Why do you think that we should be filling wetlands? Why should the county not put a stop to filling wetlands? Let me ask it that way.
I'm saying that it's not the remit of the county to control wetlands. It's a remit
The
of
Army
the
Corps of
Army
Engineers is failing at their jobs, and studies show it. You can look at any study online, expert studies, that show the Army Corps of Engineers is delinquent at their jobs, to be honest.
Oh, so you're suggesting that you have decided the Army Corps don't do their jobs properly, and so that amounts to the same thing as saying, our local police department aren't doing their jobs properly, because I saw somebody go through a red light and didn't get a ticket. These police officers aren't doing their job.
I brought forward evidence at my previous testimony, which was 20 minutes long, had a lot of evidence that was in there, and I can definitely bring you up any study. But the Army Corps of Engineers has been doing it for a very long time, and I tell you what, too much power for too long, it becomes corrupt, any organization. But we definitely have to get a grasp on what's truly happening with these wetlands. They're not being, yes, in one instance, maybe there's a kayak trail being made through a wetlands, but where is the majority, or what is really happening on a larger scale to wetlands? They're not being filled for farming like you saw in 1977. They're being filled for development, and that is wrong. And if it's not working through the Army Corps of Engineers, they're not stopping it. It's still happening. What's going to stop it? The UDO being changed and saying that the county is going to enforce no wetlands being filled. By passing this text amendment, eliminates that possibility. And you won't have to worry about 1977 study. You'll know that the Army Corps of Engineers no longer has that authority. The county can, and you're not going to allow filling of wetlands. It's just that simple.
Are you aware, sir, that county staff, as of today, can and do go out and check building sites for abuse of wetlands?
I'd like to ask counties.
They're not doing their job properly, I would suggest, is somewhat in error.
I would like to ask.
Who is that does that for the county? Is it CAMA that actually is the ones that actually look for the
U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is part of our technical review committee, and they review every subdivision plat. And if there is a request to fill wetlands on a subdivision plat, there's a process that folks have to go through with the Army Corps of Engineers to get a permit to fill the wetlands.
But does not the county have, in our county, officials that show up on the site to actually look at the wetlands, even though.
We don't have jurisdiction over wetlands. That's the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. But if we are on a site and we see that wetlands are what we suspect as wetlands being filled, then we notify the Army Corps of Engineers.
And I've seen both situations. Personally, I've seen where I had a piece of property where it was deemed, a small section was deemed wetlands by the Army Corps. And
Generally, the neighbors let us know if they suspect that wetlands are being.
well, I think if you're trying to get any work done, that's when all this becomes exposed. Like you're trying to put a bulkhead or something in, immediately that shows up on there because the county does do their job and look at it and say, well, wait a minute, there's a section of wetlands here. And I believe it was CAMA that came out to my site. So on a personal experience, I've had 2 of them now where the county was very active with it. Does not also the health department get involved from a drainage standpoint? Because we still have so much is based on well and septic. And I know the health department will indicate in their reports that there's possible wetlands. So it's not like you can just go ahead and dig out and fill with sand there. I've just seen that the county has been involved over and above in just the situations I've seen. So there has been some pretty strong, and I can't imagine a development like row homes going in over top of a swamp without, our wetlands, without serious consideration by this county and investigation into it with the Corps of Engineers. So I agree on that matter. I do agree that from what I've seen is that it does get looked at very closely. And I don't think it's easily abused in this county. And I do believe the penalties are pretty severe if you abuse it. I just can't see that our county would let anything happen over top of what the Corps of Engineers has dictated. I mean, I had to get a kind of a waiver on one of them there from the Corps of Engineers because there was dry land trees right next to a wetland area, so.
It's just the principle of the matter that we're trying to say, that we should be putting wetlands on a conservation easement, right? But in the same talk, right, we're having a conversation about how often developments are being filled developments have wetlands that are being filled. Why are we leaving that up to the Army Corps of Engineers? Why do we not stop the filling of wetlands? Why do we continue to fill wetlands for development? That is the principle that I'm trying to stop.
Is there really that much of it going on that?
I don't see it.
I don't see
not-
it either.
I can tell you I don't review all of the subdivisions in Currituck County, but I review a large majority of them, and you'll get a request every once in a while for a road crossing
Right.
or something like that. But our checklist for submittal, for preliminary plat, which is the first stage for a subdivision, if you don't have your U.S. Army Corps of Engineer delineation and a map, with that submittal, you're incomplete, and we're giving it back to you if there's wetlands on your property, because we don't even know where you can put your lots and
Right.
where your riparian buffers and all of that can go. So we don't ignore wetlands by any stretch of the
And it's a
imagination.
good point. What I've seen also is things that have been quite necessary, is like be able to get an easement across an area of wetlands. And that's something that's quite often pretty important to get done. And we're not talking about disturbing all the wetlands. And the Corps of Engineers you better have some pretty good engineering on how you're gonna do that, because you're gonna get picked apart if the engineering's not good for going through wetlands. And they're pretty strict on how you do it. So I think to say that no filling of wetlands at all in this county would really put some people in a bind. I know you're looking at it from the builder and development side, but there's the other side where it's done carefully, it's done according to the engineering, it's not disturbing the wetlands, they're getting an easement across. I know where you're coming from.
For easement, yes, but the missing point is that it's ultimately being used for development, or for, just like I used the example, just so happened that a developer got caught in the act of filling the wetlands for a development. One house is one house on the wetlands is another $3,600 in kids that are going to live in that house and taxes every year. That's more houses and more development. Same thing with the density. This is all in focus of, one, getting the density and housing developments under control in this county. We do truly have a problem raising our taxes every year, more houses coming in here, traffic's congested. There's got to be real solutions. Our infrastructure is suffering as well. Schools. If you want to get a real grasp on development in this county, this text amendment does just that. And eliminating the filling of wetlands stops builders and developers from being able to develop on wetlands. Maybe for a road crossing, maybe that might be for an emergency use.
So
Yes,
how do we
but-
do that? Let me ask the county that. So how do we, if we say to no filling of wetlands as a county thing, that's just it. Now somebody needs an easement to get across because, or they've got a flooding situation and they want to try and mitigate that on a property that's not a wetlands. There's something of that nature. So how do they get it done if it's just where the county says, no, there's no filling of wetlands? I mean, is this how would you apply for that if we
County
draw a
says
hard
no
line through it?
fill, then you don't fill, you flood.
It's just, that's the end of the story. You can't even come in. And so I think it's kind of dangerous to draw a hard line through this. I mean, I get what you're saying. I don't want development on wetlands either, but I do think we have to leave some type of an opening for the special situations where we need to get across a wetlands.
I mean, but you're buying, so people are buying a piece, so what you're using as an example is people are buying a piece of land knowing that it's wetlands, that's on it, and having the intention to fill it because it's wetlands and they built a house on it decidingly, and you're saying that they may have to fill it to keep flooding out of their house because it's wetlands. Well, they chose to
I'm
live
saying-
there.
No, that's not what I said.
Okay.
No, I think if you want to put a house in, there's a dry land area, but you're landlocked or wetland locked, to be able to have permission to get an easement into the dry land area, is certainly reasonable. And as I'm asking the county right now, that if we draw a hard line through this on no wetland filling, that dry land property was locked up. So I think there's circumstances, but I 100% agree with you on the development part.
I'm just
I
saying
don't
to
wanna see
preserve. I'm just saying to preserve that area. If they purchase that land and it's landlocked and they made that conscious decision to know that they purchased the land and it was wetlands and it can't be filled for a driveway or a way to get to that. I mean, that's
I
just.
think that's unreasonable.
I think we're confusing things. I was referring to like an older lot that's
Okay.
not a newer subdivision. They purchase a lot with wetlands on it. They can't fill it.
Right.
There's a riparian buffer. You can't fill the wetlands. The older lots, if you've got one that's flooding,
Right.
and it was before we required these easements and things, and the county says no fill, and you've got an old lot that's flooding, you're just going to have to flood.
I just think if your wording on this wasn't so direct, no, and end of story, if it left, and I don't know how you do that, and we talked about quantifying, so how you even qualify something of that nature, leaving special circumstances open. And I'm not the one that writes this for the county, and I don't handle that side of it, but it needs a little bit better wording than just flat out, no, go away.
Understood on that. I understand the no concept, right? That is, that's just a blanket statement for no filling. It's just the principle is just, I don't know. I lost my train of thought. I apologize.
No, but all I'm saying is tighten it up,
Well,
Oh, okay. What
Without
I'm
a
saying
no,
is
tighten it
leaving
up.
it to the Army Corps of Engineers, obviously, in my opinion, is not working. That's my opinion. So to put a blanket statement to say, hey, no filling of wetlands, because we leave it up to the Army Corps of Engineers, I don't think that it, through the studies that I've read, the Army Corps of Engineers is allowing a lot more filling of wetlands than we should, especially in multitudes of in other rural areas that I've read the studies on. That the Army Corps of Engineers has some serious issues and is allowing a lot more filling of wetlands than what we know.
Right. To build on wetlands, dwellings that you're gonna occupy, I agree with you. I think that's totally wrong, and it shouldn't happen. And to be able to buy wetlands from an area, some other area in North Carolina that's not in Currituck, and we don't get the benefit of that space, I think is also wrong. Because now they're buying from wetland farms in the state to, as part of the mitigation, to be able to fill and build, and I think that's wrong too. So I really feel like, you know, if you're gonna tighten that up, I don't know if there's any wetland farms in what our suppliers in Currituck, but I believe that if you're gonna tighten that statement up, is that, yeah, if you're gonna get approval to mitigate, and you wanna go ahead and deal with the ratio of how much you need to buy in wetlands to do this small area, because the ratio is pretty severe, it would be really nice if it stays in Currituck County and doesn't go out. So the only thing I'm saying, I agree with you, but I just think drawing a hard line through this thing is not the answer. I think if you studied this and tightened it up in certain ways and allowed certain things to still take place, and look at the statement I just made about preserving wetlands here in Currituck County as a result of a mitigation, and look at the ratios. That's pretty significant, you know? So if somebody wants to fill whatever here, I don't know what it is it a 10-to-1 or something? It's pretty significant.
I believe so, 10 to 1.
Yeah, about 10-to-1. So 10 acres would have to be then saved in Currituck County. But right now, it can be anywhere in the state, and that just bothers
Would
me.
manage that. I'm going to take you back to the county attorney's email about warning against Currituck County taking the authority on of managing wetlands and a wetland bank and that kind of thing. And
Yeah, and I want to speak to that
Right.
on the
And- yeah,
county
if
attorney.
you have that email that I gave you,
I
if you
did.
want to read that from her.
Yeah, and what she had said, and I want to, basically, she said, let me put my reading glasses on. And this is from Megan Morgan, the county attorney, and it's to Tammy. I spoke with Carl Pruitt this afternoon regarding your email and potential text amendments on prohibiting all jurisdictional wetland fill. This is something the county can do. However, I say this with major caution. If all jurisdictional wetland fill is prohibited, this could create some very serious concerns. Two examples of this would be inability to make repairs following hurricane damage, or inability to put a culvert in to create a road, even if that wetland area is tiny compared to upland areas. So I get what she's saying, that basically, if you've got higher, sandier property that you want to develop, and you have a small swath of wetlands, and you need to get to that property, which is valuable property, this keeps that from occurring. So, yeah,
And like the
that's pretty
county
clear.
couldn't manage a wetland bank to make sure that you're creating 10 acres of uplands in Currituck County because you filled an acre. We don't have the authority to do that. That would be the U.S.
That's a
Army
state,
Corps of
that's a
Engineers.
state level, isn't it?
It's U.S. Army Corps of
Oh, it's-
Engineers.
it is a
That's
Corps of
federal
Engineers,
law,
okay.
yeah.
I think what we can look at, though, is if you go to item 12, it also deals with wetlands. And this has to do with, and Mr. Mims, I think what we've got to look at and what this board is trying to do is really drill down on some of these items and see where there's some flexibility. And because even small tweaks will get results on this. This is a process. And I think if we look at some of these things on how, if wetlands are considered open areas, if drainage ponds are considered open areas, that may get to the point where you're not going to have as dense development. And I think if we can drill down some of these more specific items, especially item 12, that's something that Mr. Corbella talked about last time. So let us go ahead and start discussing that as well.
Yeah, I just want to express that, behind our conversations that we've had, just between me and you, and previous Mr. Kemp, was about this whole text amendment and stuff is in regards to, having a little bit, and I'm not trying to say control, but yeah, essentially we're just a little bit of grasp on development and to kind of get things to take a little bit of a turn because addressing, just like Mr. Kemp had told me before, and I think the commissioners had said before, is addressing minimum lot size isn't the answer to slowing density. Addressing just density isn't the answer to slowing growth. This was designed to totally provide solution to an ever-growing problem, I think, in our county. And yes, if minor tweaks are what's going to get this to pass, I mean, we need this. Our county needs it, our infrastructure needs it, and we need to preserve the rural character of this county. And what we've been doing in the past, the UDO the way it's been, every time, it's been said by the commissioners every single time. If it meets the UDO requirements and the 4 stipulations to approve the development, it's going to get approved. The only way to solve a growth explosion in a county is by doing these things that I addressed and that the citizens have addressed in this text amendment. And that's where this is. So if we can make minor tweaks to, maybe not all wetlands being filled, maybe filling them, having a thing where they can fill them for an easement or whatever. Sure, those are minor tweaks that are reasonable, but I just want some background.
Just have to have them. We can't just draw a line through this and say, no, they have to be there.
Understood.
So,
And let me ask Mr. Kemp a question too, because this comes up, and you might, you were in Virginia Beach, right, before you came
Yes.
here? Were there any cases in the green area, like in Pungo and some of those places, where the city actually bought development rights from certain farms and certain agricultural? Did you recall any of that? Because that's something we've never really discussed, and I don't know that the commissioners have ever really discussed buying development rights from farmers and still allow them to farm, but
Yeah.
that keeps agricultural from being rezoned, which is where a lot of this problem comes from.
good point.
Yes, Virginia Beach does have a program. It was put in place several years ago. That's exactly that. What it is, it's a voluntary program where the farmer enters into it and gets incentives, tax breaks and monetary incentives. And what they do is they sign an agreement that, this property must be farmed, cannot be developed for 50 years.
And then they
And so
Yeah, 'cause
the
I get
city
that.
continues to provide that incentive, and it's basically entering into a contract that property will not be developed.
Do we have that here in Currituck?
No, we don't.
Okay, because I had the same thing. Basically, I took a farm I had in the state of Maryland, and I basically bought into that program and took 1/5 of that property and locked it into forestry, never to be built on. That was a 25-year contract.
Yeah.
So
So the county may not have that, but there's still a conservation thing where you can put your land in it and just say that you're not.
Right, because what's
and the
happening?
federal government,
Yeah, what's happening,
subsidizes
and
you
this is
instead of
getting
the
off
county.
top, but this is addressing.
but it would be good for the
Yeah.
county to.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, because a lot of what's happening is some of these farms are going to next generations and then on, and they're being sold and they're being rezoned, a lot of agricultural land, and that's part of the problem, that a lot of agricultural land is being rezoned and it's being developed. And, there may be a different way to approach at least part of this than everything that's being proposed here. So and that's why I wanted this to be a little more informal discussion, because I think it's just good that everybody sits around and talks and beats it,
For sure.
down a little bit, and we see what we can come up with, so all right, thank you.
No.
Can I
Yeah,
summarize
yeah,
one
sure.
last point, if I may? I find it hard to imagine that if somebody were blatantly destroying, to go back with the wetlands thing very briefly, if somebody, a developer or individual, were blatantly filling wetlands with apparently no permission whatsoever, that if a concerned citizen approached the Army Corps and said, this is what's going on, you need to look into it, I find it hard to imagine that the Army Corps would just brush it off, ignore it, or choose not to do anything with it. to go one step further, I do know that Currituck County staff, for whom I have a lot of respect, I don't agree with them all the time on everything, but I do respect what they do. And I can just about assure you, 100%, that if somebody were to approach any member of the planning staff here and said, do you know that a neighbour, a developer, is filling wetlands, that it would be looked into by this department very quickly.
I do have one question, talking about all of the wetland stuff. Just curious, I mean, I live here, work here myself, so name me a couple of developments where you're saying that wetlands have been filled in and they've gotten away with it, or you feel like wetlands have been destroyed for development purpose where they did not have proper permits. And I understand that you're saying you disagree with the Army Corps of Engineers. However, that is federally regulated, and that is something that is a nationwide thing. So where is development or multiple developments that you can name that's?
So, how am I going to say this? Particularly being naming a development,
Or an area, give me an area, a road,
Or they've been in
somewhere.
breach of what the Corps of
okay. So
Engineers.
for one,
To support what you're saying.
Right,
I'm not saying it's not true. I'm not saying things don't happen. You give me an example to support. So there's studies, there's
So say
facts.
so what I was saying is it's not necessarily those that are doing it unpermitted. That's not the focus and the problem.
You
The
can
problem
even-
is that the Army Corps of Engineers is allowing development on wetlands when they're filled.
But name some of those developments and how much wetlands do you think it was? Do you think it was just maybe an acre? Do you think it was like, I mean, I
1 acre here, 1 acre here, 1 acre here, it all adds up. But at the end of the day, I'm hesitant to name, and here's my thing. I think there's a reason why there's not an audience here today, and it's some fear. And I tell you what, I would name them, but I can't risk it, and I'm not going to get a lawsuit on me. I just can't do that right now. I'm sorry. And in closed door conversations with the county staffing, I'll be more than happy to have those conversations. But this is going on television. I'm not going to do that.
I think an issue with audience is, as citizens, we all fail to do our parts of being involved as we truly should, and we regret that at times. But as far as supporting your theory, I understand your concern. Trust me, I have a concern for protecting wetlands myself. However, if to support the no factor, like they're saying, if you could give me something that supports it better, then there's more weight to sway you to the other side, other than going with the current standards that are used, federally regulated, and Army Corps of Engineers with proper permits and standards that go along now.
I don't blame him for being very reticent to,
I can't do this in this forum. I'm sorry. This is
there are
public.
lawsuits.
I would.
Well, then if he doesn't want to name that, but I mean, give me an area, give an area. And I know there's Moyoc, I know that there's low water areas, but you've got to have some kind of, you've got to have something with a federal standard that's federally regulated, and the Army Corps of Engineers handle it, and there's a proper permit system. Now, as far as erroneously filling in, even though I may not agree, as Mr. Ennis said, with every decision that this county has made, or every development decision that is made, that doesn't mean that it's right or wrong or indifferent. That's my opinion, and there's other people's opinions. However, I think it's safe to say that there is not an erroneous or just pure prejudice against the filling of wetlands is what I'm getting at, to support a no factor is where I'm going. Whereas where we've talked about it's too, like you said, you can't just put a hard line on it.
No. To clean that up a little bit, I would just settle for a case that's in public information, where it's public knowledge that the Corps of Engineers gave permission to ABC Builder to fill in that wetlands. And if there's a significant one or two of those out here that are of public knowledge because it was approved and it happened, I mean, this is something that's, you're not spelling out, you're not giving us anything more than what anybody could go look up themselves. So I'm not talking about it, it might be, but.
And I'm not trying to put you in a
Right,
tight
in a
spot either.
spot,
So,
yeah.
so I understand
Oh,
that. So,
right,
so
right.
I respect your decision to do that. So
Right, if it wasn't this month, I just today is not the day for me to name, to name it. It may be in closed session, or, behind a closed door conversation where it's not publicized. I would.
So let's do it again. Do you know of anybody that would be public record in the past, of anybody that may have been fined in the past that would have been, or do?
Oh, he had permission. That's the bottom line, is he did have permission. It's just a factor that I said is that, you know, he was filling wetlands for development. It wasn't for no kayak, launching. It wasn't for no walkthrough. It was for a home to go
And the
on.
Corps of Engineers gave him permission.
They
to
give
do
him
so.
permission. I'm not saying that's not, I'm not saying that's why I'm not saying that erroneously filling is happening on a large scale. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the Army Corps of Engineers is okaying everything that a developer will want. We have experts in every field across this nation, and guess what? They all make mistakes. We've got bridge failures, infrastructure problems. You got all kinds of issues. Experts design those bridges, and years later we have problems with those, right? Nothing is perfect. Experts are approving these the Army Corps of Engineers are approving wetlands to be filled for development. It's true, and that's the problem I have.
I believe to bring a fix, though, you have to bring a plausible resolution.
And the plausible resolution, yes, maybe the resolution isn't to just eliminate the filling of wetlands, but to provide stipulations that would allow them, but not development. Because that, huh?
Exactly. Reword it.
That-
You know, I just think
that-
that hard line is just reword it.
That's fine, you know, not just,
Tammy, is there
filling
anything
wetlands-
keeping him from coming back with, cleaning this, the way it's stated and coming back again?
Y'all need to have that conversation between the board to see if you supports the county taking authority away from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers of managing wetlands.
Let me ask you this, since we had an email from the county attorney, is it possible for her to come and answer some specific questions from this board? Is that
Sure, we can-
appropriate?
Sure, we can
Yeah.
ask her to come.
Yeah, I think that would be, you know, we can get a little more details then.
That would put you off another.
Well, I mean, this is a lot.
The board can table the case twice, so.
at the end of the day, the answer is not a no. I'm willing to come back anytime. I'm not gonna quit.
Yeah.
So I will be here.
I mean, you know, there's a lot here, and this young lady here keeps raising her hand and shaking her head,
She
so
wants
I
some
think.
time.
So,
She wants some
would you
time.
like to speak this time? Please come forward.
I did not sign up, so this is informal.
But that's okay, just give us your name and address.
I came here to listen because I haven't been at a planning. I'm Connie Hedrick. I reside at 296 Summit Farms Trail, Moyock, North Carolina. I'm a broker-owner realtor, so housing is my game. I understand it, but this is my home. I want to acknowledge Mr. Mims for his passion about this, because underlying, when we go to the planning approval boards, it's already done. It's signed, sealed, it's delivered. It depends if it's a special use permit or whether it's a different zoning. We, the people, have lost our opportunity to speak, so I appreciate it. I believe I've just breezed over this massive undertaking, but I believe Mr. Mims' intention here with the green space is really, Currituck has a culture that's been with us forever, and it's our heritage. I'm new here, so I'm going to address Mr. Ennis and Mr. Kemp. I know very well in Chesapeake, Riverwalk subdivision, they brought thousands and thousands of tons of sand when the EPA, under President Carter, because I was alive back then, did say we are not going to be intrusive, not to our wetlands, not only because it's a wetlands, but because the estuaries really have a lot to do with our water, our flow of water, our water tables from the mountains down to the shorelines. It has to do whether the shorelines can have erosion, so we don't have rapid end rights that erosion are leaving our boundaries. So there are a lot of reasons not to have an opportunity to purchase wetlands and then put that monetary repository into a wetlands land bank that are not really locally here. And I agree with council, even though we may not feel that the Corps of Engineers are effective because it's impacting us, they have a big ditch to ditch with the new administration, and county to county, they got a lot of water to cover. So I think what would be really important with us with the UDO when we're talking about development, if they're going to buy a piece of land to develop that is wetlands, that area not be inclusive of the required open space that's in the subdivision. So I think the intention of Mr. Nims is that if we're going to say we are going to require the developers to have X ratio of open green space, that they, if they buy that 1 acre, that 1 acre of green space is valued someplace else. And it's not diminished, because that way it's, as Tammy said, our land bank, which we should not have jurisdiction over at this time, might be in Hertford. There, I know of a land bank, because I do real estate, so when I have low-lying area, at my developers and people, my owners say, what can I do with my wetlands? Well, you can sell it to the land bank. It's going to cost, and then they can develop it. So it is a thing, but it's not here in Currituck. I don't understand why. But along with what Mr. Kemp said, which we do not have that I know of in Currituck, is an arrangement for incentives between the Currituck and the state of what we do with agricultural, because our agricultural land is not ready for development. It's been tilled. It's been burned. It can't hold dispersed water well. It might take 50 years to get 25 acres or 30 acres ready for development. While that farmer's second generation family, we do it with solar farms. We let the second generation rent out 30 years of land for solar, because it takes nothing from the county but gives back to the county. So that might be an option. So I think part of what part of 12 is I agree with the board at this time. It's a very hard line to say no, but if you can't say no because it's not optimal for every place, then where do you, as the UDO, say, if you buy this with a permit, this subdivision, you've got to find something here for this to maintain the character and the culture of our county. And I think that's the intention here. And density does have everything to do with how the thing changes. We are going to have some kind of small home affordable for our families. It may not be townhouses. It might be something else, but my 21-year-old grandson has no home to go buy in Currituck County. So it is a problem. And if our Currituck Imagine has a 25-year scope on it, then all of these shelved subdivisions that are out there, I think we should pull those shelved subdivisions and reactivate them on what Currituck is going to look like in 20 years from now, with our second generation, our blended population, our school demands, instead of bring in a subdivision because it's on the shelf and say it's been approved, and now as long as we can meet with the commission 85% of the infrastructure, we're going to approve it. So I think that's the intention, is to revamp what the UDO can use so we can really imagine where Currituck Imagine is now for the master plan. And I come from Chesapeake, born in Norfolk, graduated Great Bridge High School. So I know, Mr. Bass, I know that controlled growth is a hard line to pull, but it can be done, and it can be done well. But we just have to get ahead of it. And I think that's the intention of what Mr. Mims has for us in the county. So that's why I was here. I do know that Riverwalk, not one single piece of it, and I do know that they were fined heavily after the fact, but what you don't know won't hurt you. So it's the little things, it's the little compromise here that I think they're worried about. It is not staff's job to take over the Corps of Engineer purview for what it is, but it is our jobs to make sure that what we do bring forth to staff for approval does have the right oversight as it's being developed. And I think we can do something about that. So thank you for listening. It wasn't my intention to talk.
That's fine. I'm going to bring up another point that we haven't really discussed here on some of these. We all know about the waterfowl in Currituck County. It's part of our heritage, part of our culture. They feed on fields, agricultural land, and as it disappears, then they disappear. And that's why I'm going back to some of these developmental rights that, that is something that we may want to at least, well, this board certainly can't do that, but if we can throw the idea out there that, that is something that has occurred. Some of the farms in Moyock were full of the waterfowl, and they're not anymore. And specifically, some of those farms are what is being developed now in Moyock.
Yeah.
So that's something that we can certainly, as citizens of the county, really start looking at as a different side of it. So I think if we really tweak on some of these open space definitions and things, and then look at things in a broader perspective, maybe we can get a handle on this.
Yes, I grew up in rural Chesapeake on this side of, and into, because I used to go down to the granary. My dad was a trapper. So I've done a lot of nutria, a lot of fox, all those things, and we'd bring pelts down here. So Currituck is like home base. But to your point, Mr. Bass, is going down Puddin Ridge Road, I look forward when the snow geese came in. And now we have no place for the snow geese to come in. We have solar farms on either side. I know it doesn't take anything away from the county. It gives to the county as far as that for infrastructure and all those things. But I tell you what, when I went down there and there was no place for those snow geese to land, and I was sad, because that's part of the reason why we are still here. So anyway, thank you for letting me speak. I'm glad it was informal. Thank you,
Appreciate
Mr.
it.
Dennis.
I have a little more information for you, too. I contacted our historian for our department, who's not supposed to be working, but she's listening. These are the developments that have Army Corps permits to fill wetlands between Donna and I over the last 20 to 25 years. Villas at Corolla Bay, Countryside Estates, possibly Tucker's Cove, and then Moyock Commons is the one that I know of, and that was like 0.08 acres of wetlands.
So in other words, these developments, there's a percentage of the development that has wetlands.
There may be
And-
a lot or two, or it could be more than that, but yeah, the Moyock Commons one was mine. That was one lot, and of that lot, it was 0.08 of an acre.
Wow.
And there was only how many again?
Villas at Corolla Bay, Countryside Estates, possibly Tucker's Cove, and then Moyock Commons.
Tucker's Cove, that's off Tulls Creek, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The timeline on that again?
Probably about 25 years.
So 4 and 25.
The Corolla
There may
Bay,
be others. That's just going on our memory sitting here tonight.
how many acres of wetlands was involved with Corolla Bay being filled?
I don't know the acreage without pulling files.
But it's just 4. We have 4 that we know of.
That they're 100% aware of, correct?
Yeah, okay. I just wish we did have some incentive things to hold on to agricultural, because it is the next generation that's coming in and saying, I'm gonna cash in on mom and dad's farm, and that's where it's going. But if we could get that incentive program internal where the farmers are incentivized to keep it in an agricultural environment, that would be wonderful. I mean, I saw it work in other states, and it does work.
It has certainly worked very, very effectively in Virginia Beach.
Yeah. Now, that's not done from a citizen, that's something the county just needs to kind of look at, or can that be brought forward by,
I think that's just policy from
Right.
the county.
right?
Correct. The county would adopt a policy like that. I will say that when it was put in place in Virginia Beach, it was a process to work out the logistics. It's, it's not something that can happen overnight. I am familiar. I'm a little rusty, but yes, I did work with that for 10
That's where
years.
I really feel that's a big step in the right direction if we can get something like that going here. Because I think that, some of these old-time farmers want their farms to stay in agriculture and be farmed. And, that they might be incentivized to go and say, okay, well, look, I'm leaving something to the kids anyways, because they're getting the money off this program.
Right, and you've sparked my curiosity. I'm going to take it on myself. I'm going to reach out to people up there and talk. It's called the Agricultural Reserve Program, is what it's called. And so if you Googled it or something, I'm sure some information would come up. But
I've seen it
it
work.
is a
Like I
good
said,
program.
My farm, I bought into it on part of my farm as well, so, and I was happy to do it. Okay, I don't, I think we beat that one pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I think that what we're gonna try, and I don't think we're gonna resolve all these issues tonight. As a matter of fact, I know that, but I wanted to bring it back up. We covered a lot of territory here, and we've talked to a lot of different people, and this was a big undertaking on your part. So it's a big undertaking on our part. And I think items 12 and 13, especially items 12, where we look at how we define open spaces, I think that's something that we can really study and really dissect that. And not tonight, because it's late, it's getting later, but we can certainly take a look at it. And I mean, I have no problems with entertaining the motion, to table until,
Well, you want to bring the
and
attorney back too,
and
right?
I'd like to have the attorney come at our next meeting and
What
just-
is it that you're going to want the attorney to address?
Just the 40, the fill not being allowed in the 404 wetlands. I think she could just shed some light on,
What we can and can't do, right?
Well, would that be between us, I guess? Well, I don't know what you mentioned about as far as, I don't disagree with having her here to answer questions, but, I mean, would we even vote to say that the county can overrule Army Corps of Engineers?
Yeah, I think you need to answer that question. I mean, we can bring Megan, absolutely, but I think you need to decide as a board if you're going to vote for the county to take jurisdiction away from U.S. Army Corps of Engineers first.
for that. I mean, we can vote on that specific item.
Well, I think you need to decide, not vote, that was the wrong word.
Yeah,
I
that's-
think you need to decide as a board if you want the county to take jurisdiction away from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers
Okay.
before, because if you don't want to do that as a board, there's no need for Megan to come.
Okay.
If you do want to do that, then we need to have Megan here.
Well, the reason why I brought that up is because, like Tom said, there might be some questions where the item could be tweaked somewhat, but I understand what you're saying.
And it's not taken away, I think it's override, to basically, you've got the Army Corps of Engineers, but if a case does come up, that they've given permission to fill for a development, I mean, I really feel like the county needs to have the ability to say, and even the citizens to say, no to this, and so if that is happening or could happen, it would be nice to have the county have the the capability to say no.
Then that would be the county taking on the responsibility and taking the jurisdiction away from the Army. The Army Corps of Engineers would no longer be the jurisdictional authority for wetlands. That would be the county.
So that's a
So
hard line,
the-
basically, if we
So the
want
board
to do
needs to
that.
decide if that's, as the majority of the board, is that what you want to do? If that's what you want to do, then we definitely need to have the county attorney here.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we can
So as
vote
a,
on that as.
I don't know that you need to vote on it. You need to have a discussion and see if the majority of you want
Okay,
to
that's
do
fine.
that so that we can, if y'all need to continue discussing it. If the majority of you do not want to do that and want the Army Corps to continue to have the authority to regulate wetlands, then we don't need to continue discussing it.
Okay.
Right, and I think there's also a discussion, part of that discussion would have to be the process as well, because right now it is the Army Corps of Engineers that comes and delineates the wetlands. If that gets, if you're pushing everything to county staff, there's more than just enforcing the UDO of fill. And, as the director, I would have questions about ability to do that, to have the expertise on staff, to have the amount of staff. I think there's some challenges there. The Army Corps, in my experience, has been very receptive.
Okay. But we can certainly visit item 12, which has to do with how wetlands are defined as open space. We're really only at this
Correct.
point talking about item 13.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, 12,
which is just basically a line in the sand. No. So, yeah, I mean, this board can certainly, I've got a feeling I know how people are, their opinions on that.
Would the line in the sand on no also say that the county is taking the jurisdiction? To say that? No filling? So that's also saying county's taking jurisdiction over.
well, right, and this might be something the attorney could enlighten us more about. Now, if the UDO, as the attorney said in her email, we have the ability to put that in the UDO. I think the danger, if you take that hard line in instances like you were talking about where there's a dry property on an island, I think the danger would be getting challenged on that. If someone challenged, then you get into the federal trumps state, trumps local. And I think that's something, that goes well beyond my legal expertise, but I think that would be a danger as well.
And see, that's
And,
why I
and that's
think,
with
yeah,
taking the hard line.
Yeah.
I think there's, you could examine stuff such as filling, no fill for a developable lot. I think that's different than filling for access, for example.
But the county would have to police that.
Yes.
Any
I-
type of tweaks
yes,
we
we are,
make
right.
to the ordinance, anything different than the Army Corps of Engineers requires means that the county has to have another bureaucratic level to do this.
Right, if there's anything above and beyond what the Army Corps enforces, yes, that would fall, if it's in the Unified Development Ordinance, that would fall upon the county to regulate.
I think it only goes into one area, and that's basically development for housing or for habitat, for human living there, whether it's commercial or whether it's residential. And I think this is the only area we really have of concern. I don't think you have the concern about the small thing where a guy needs access or the things that the county might, or that the Corps of Engineers might say, okay, well, your engineering looks good, you can get across that wetlands by doing that. I think it's mainly the population and the density of more houses and more buildings and using wetlands to do so. And I think, is that not the underlying concern?
Yeah. So I was going to say this earlier. I taking an aggressive approach because I didn't. I wrote the text amendment, right, and that was what I made promises to stand by, right. But ultimately, the goal is to have the text amendment approved. If we're stuck on a hard line of no filling of wetlands, I'm positive the community can be feeling of success to the changes if everything else, or if there's some minor articulations or changes that we, that I don't necessarily hardline on, no filling of wetlands. I think that can be, if that needs to be removed so we can move forward to other aspects of the text amendment or to get more, other means of approval, then I'm sure we're willing to do that. If that needs to be removed for an approval, we can do that.
I don't know if it can be removed. We have to vote yes or no on it. Can it be removed?
How about that?
You would vote on each item in the text amendment, and if you don't agree with that or don't want
Right,
to
so
support
it's a
that,
yes
you
or a
would
no.
recommend denial of it.
So we could vote on that item particularly?
Yeah, you're going to vote on each item individually.
Okay, but that doesn't close the entire case.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That's what I'm saying. All right.
Yeah, you just gotta come back for a second round on that one.
Yeah,
Well,
Mr.
you-
Ennis has a question.
Potentially not. I mean,
But that's okay. I
with
mean,
your
it's a
discussions
lot
right now,
here,
I
and if
think
it-
you're a lot closer to taking action than you realize.
Yeah.
I think with your discussions you've just had, I think you're a whole lot closer to
Agreed.
taking an action on this than you realize.
Could,
And Brian wants you.
could I suggest that we're going round in a circle here, almost, and might I suggest that we request that our county attorney be here to advise us on what rights we as a board, we as a committee have in recommending that the county change policy or does whatever, so that we know exactly where our beginning line, the finishing line
You mean on
is.
the
On the
wetland
whole
fill?
thing, wetlands, particularly the wetlands. Yes, sir.
I think we can vote on that at this point and get that off the table one way or the other. I think we're at that point now.
Whether the board wants
Because
to,
we can remove, we can basically, can we discuss and vote to remove that item?
no, because you're gonna,
We
the
have to
text
vote
amendment
on it.
has to move together as a whole. So what I would
right.
suggest is you take your sheet, your sheet or your motion sheet, and let's start at item 1, and let's go through them.
Yep.
Because I think we're there. I think with what y'all have talked about tonight, I think you're ready to go through each item and discuss them, and we might have one or two to discuss, but if we can kind of keep them in order and do it kind of logically, item 1, 2, 3, 4 to 15, I think you're a whole lot closer than you realize.
Ms. Tammy, quick question.
Yeah.
Does the, so you're voting, they're voting individually on the items, but in the text amendment as a whole, if it's approved with conditions, can the conditions be that I remove a portion of the text amendment being the wetland, no filling of wetland?
What they will do is they'll just recommend denial of that particular item.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair, thank you.
Let me give you one of these things so that way you can see what they're looking at.
I don't know if I have the paper I need to make motions.
Did we get cheat sheets, guys?
Yeah,
We
Yeah.
do? Okay.
I don't-
Here
I
they
don't-
are, here they are.
yeah.
There is, okay.
It starts with 5 and 6 though.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, we did, okay, this is what I was looking for. Why are we starting at 5 and 6?
The first sheet is the items that are recommended approval.
Okay, okay, gotcha,
All
I
of the
see.
approvals are together, and then all of the denials are together,
I gotcha.
just so you can make 2 motions instead of 16.
I thought we wanted to do 16, Tammy.
You can do 16.
Absolutely, you could group them together, or you could go item by item and take a vote on each. That's,
How do you want to do it?
whatever's easier for you, that's at your
So question
discretion.
on 12 again,
Yeah.
which is, that's the,
That's the
part-
open space definitions and
well,
stuff.
one
See,
is half's recommended, half's denied. Or half. Could you touch on that again for me one more time?
Yeah, so,
Please.
what item 12 would be, you can split that motion. So you could recommend approval of all, none, or denial all, none, or since it's 2 pieces, you can recommend approval and denial of portions of it. So with item 12, that's the one that is requesting that all wetlands be placed in the conservation easement, so that portion is on the approval side. And then when you go to the denial on the last page, page 4, it says, I move to deny the portion of item 12, not allowing wetlands and other environmentally sensitive features to be in open space. So that splits item 12, so part of it gets denied, and staff is recommending that
To
part
leave
of
that
it gets
as-
denied and part of it gets approved.
Why are you recommending the part of the denial?
The staff recommends that wetlands be allowed to be counted in open space because wetlands are often used as open space features, and that's what I was talking about, where they use the wetland trails, the kayak launches, the boat launches, the different things.
And the approval with the conservation part,
Yeah, the approval part is the conservation easement that would be required across all wetlands.
And we vote on each item.
Absolutely, yeah,
Okay.
you actually need to,
Okay.
yep.
Where do we start?
So what I would recommend is that you have your discussion with the worksheet, and go through and make your decision whether you want to recommend approval or denial through 1 through 15 or 16, and then use your motion sheet to actually make your motion.
Yeah, no, but you need your cheat sheet to say it. You can't just say that, can you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if
Can we-
you
Can we just say
go with
this?
the recommendations that staff has made, after you go through your little cheat sheet here and we make sure everybody's on the same page, then you would use your motion sheet to make the motion.
But everybody doesn't need to be on the same page, correct?
Needs to be a majority. You're right.
Right.
Majority.
right.
You're absolutely
Okay.
right. Thank you. Thank you.
everybody doesn't have to say, Mr. Dahl.
That's one motion.
As well, you would have to take each item. But you can do that, but they're all the same thing, they all have to be
Okay.
Could I possibly make a motion that we, this is terribly involved.
Yeah, I agree.
It is,
And
yeah.
for 16 decisions, without any sort of arbitrary, just let's go home situation.
Yeah.
My recommendation, my request would be that we table this at least until the next meeting, during which time we get a chance to discuss it item by item, which we haven't done this evening.
No,
really.
exactly. We've
And-
covered a
and
lot of
make some-
territory.
With a goal of making some definite decisions at the end of next meeting.
Yeah, so we have.
And
that's-
we'll
that's-
bring the attorney in too as well.
And with the attorney here as a
Okay.
reference would be excellent.
Okay, now next meeting, you'll have to make a motion or it'll move forward either way.
Okay.
You can only table it twice.
Okay, we'll have to do it, but so we only have 2 chances.
Only have 2 chances,
All
right?
right.
Seen this
You can't
happen.
leave him hanging forever.
Yeah, all right.
Have you ever seen this happen? Have you ever seen
So
this happen?
do you have Mr., yeah, but there's a lot to go. You got Mr. Ennis's motion?
I do.
Okay, when Mr. Ennis made a motion, do I hear a second? Basically, it's to table and to bring the county attorney.
I'll second that.
We've got a motion and a second, and this is about tabling until the next meeting, and that's the last one we have. And I would recommend, if we
Work session.
can, before we vote on this, that we have a work session before.
Right.
Since
least-
it's an old case, at least we can have a work session and talk about this again.
Let's see if
How
we can-
long, how much time would you like us to allot for the work session? I know half an hour can be
Yeah, because we'll
tight.
have something
Half
else
hour
on the
goes awful
agenda, won't
quick.
we? We'll have other
Yeah,
things
you'll-
on the agenda.
Yes.
We've got several items on the agenda.
Wait 1 hour for this.
Y'all want to, can y'all get here at 5? I know that.
We're here.
Not you, not you. I know you're here. You never go anywhere anyway. So, but, Mike, is that okay with you guys?
It's
5
the
o'clock?
8th. The meeting will be August 8th.
8, okay. 5 o'clock? I mean, y'all can, we don't have to be right here. We can start the discussion
I'll do
without.
my best, I can't promise
Okay.
I'll be here by 5.
All
You
right,
have to trust us when you come in, where we're at.
all right, so, but we have a motion to table
We second the motion, just gonna
And
vote
a
on it.
second, and then this is kind of an informal thing. So we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
And it'll help if y'all go through this on your own before you come
Absolutely.
And
back.
I think we really need to focus on item 12, because I do think item 12 is something that we can really deal with. That has to do with open spaces, and it also deals with wetlands and how developments are, how density is computed. So,
I think in the next work session, it's gonna be our goal to get through all of these.
Yeah.
In the work session, so we can come into the meeting and say, here's where we are.
okay, so that's been.
Unless the attorney says something different.
Yeah, so that motion has been passed, and, no, we can't do that. She said we can't do it, so anyway.
Thanks, Steve. You can keep them.
So the motion was passed, it was tabled. At this time, I'm gonna entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Yep, Mr. Dahl made a motion, do I hear a second?
You skipped over Kevin's announcement.
Oh, sorry, Kevin, we'll hold that there.
Well, I know we're anxious to go. I will hand out something to you, and I just want to explain what it is. It is just a real high-level view for our permits and inspections division. We track numbers, number of permits, how many for residential, commercial, certificate over the past 3 years, that sort of thing. So I've just put together, just some images, graphs of just the numbers of what we're producing over the past 3 years. So there will be, just some charts to look at. And then this is a particularly interesting one. It takes 6 of the things we track: total permits, total permit applications, new residential, residential improvements, commercial, inspections performed, and certificates of occupancy issued. And this is over the last 3 years, every month, how we're tracking. So it's just interesting, we're up here and we make you make recommendations and decisions on development. I just think it's valuable and interesting to see where the rubber hits the road in our permitting, what we're doing. So I will pass these out to you. I'm preparing a more detailed report for the Board of Commissioners, and I'm certainly happy to pass that along when it's done. This is just a real brief overview. I had the numbers, and I wanted to just compile something for you guys to look at. So that's what I've got.
You got copies for us tonight?
I have copies
Is there anything
tonight.
specific you want to talk about that you put together? Is there something that's really highlighted that, we can't bring it up on there, can we?
No, you actually can. Tammy, next slide, please. And here, if you want to
I don't know about that.
take one and pass. It's two things. So 2 sheets and then pass.
Nice color.
And I know we've been here a while, but this is, I get a kick out of this, so thank you for
No, I appreciate what
letting me
you've done.
share this. So the first slide here is total permit applications. One thing to note on this is that this is applications, not necessarily permits, because a lot of applications, let's say for a new home, will actually have a mechanical, an electrical, a permit. So we have actually done over 10,000 permits this year.
Jeez.
But for applications, this year we did 2,873. That is a 5% increase over the past 2 years. So we are doing more permits.
And that's building permits?
Those are all trade permits. So that's building permits, electrical, mechanical, plumbing. As I said, some applications will have more than one permit. So actually, permits in hand were over 10,000.
Is there a breakdown as to where these are building?
Localities.
Yeah, locality side of it?
There is, and
All in
that
my neighborhood right now.
and that is to come. I just this afternoon got the spreadsheet that breaks it down into neighborhood and township.
Okay.
So I haven't had a chance to compile those numbers, but we do have that information for the last year.
That'd be fascinating information.
So this shows, we are doing more permits. One interesting thing is we're bringing in less money on permits. And the reason for that is really, if you look at, later in this report, in fiscal year '21, we did a lot more new residential permits. And essentially, those are the big money makers. And so since we're doing less of those permits, we're bringing in less money, even though we're doing more permits. And if you look at, Tammy, the next slide, this is new residential permits. We issued 429 of them this past fiscal year. That is up from last year where we did 389, but in fiscal year '21, we issued 626 new residential permits.
COVID time, wasn't it?
They were cranking out in '21.
Oh, gosh. They're still trying to build them.
Yep, and then showing here the average permit value, that is the value that the person pulling the permit, the value that they assess the residential structure at. So you can see also that the permits, the cost of the construction that they're stating on there has gone up.
You would just divide the number with the value to give you an average.
But the
Yep.
average permit value, is that what the contractor says they're valuing it? Is that what they're sold
Yes,
at?
that is listed as what the contractor says, not necessarily their hard cost.
What it hits the market and what it sells for.
Right, that isn't what it sells,
Okay.
what it necessarily sells for. But it does give you an idea, how home prices are tracking. There is a relationship there.
To the moon.
And just one interesting thing, we've seen an increase from last year in homes. One area we have seen an increase that has been noticeable is the off-road area. Just
so many
in this
neighbors.
past year, I didn't have the exact numbers, but talked with our building official, and I'm guessing 40 to 45 new home permits this past year in the off-road area, and that is much higher than we normally see.
Yeah, we're a little worried about it there.
I'll tell you that.
We have only sand roads, we've got horses running around, we got more and more people, it's crazy. And then a lot of those are renting, it's absolutely insane out there right now.
I've noticed since they started cleaning those roads and actually cutting them through where there's roads, a lot of those lots are starting to hit the market.
All right, well, they're not cutting anything through on the roads there. The only thing they're cutting
They're
is,
cleaning them up
Yeah.
to where they're navigable or whatever you want.
No.
Find the lots now.
no, the county, nobody touches those roads in a 4x4. They're not even owned by the county, they're privately held. And
Whatever, but whoever's on the very north end of the beach, whoever's cutting into where you can actually drive on.
yeah, that's where people are saying, I've got a lot that's out in the middle of that mess over there, and there was a platted road. Somebody knock a hole through there to get to my lot, and that's how it's happening. Unless it's deemed wetlands, in which case you're not doing it, it's a whole different story, but
And with that happen, a lot of them are popping up.
it's insane out there right now. I don't know if you
Agreed.
guys
No,
ever
I
make
agree.
it out there, but it's absolutely insane. I look out my window now, it's like, where'd this city come from?
It is, and you're absolutely right. There's, just to give you a number, there are 3,000 platted lots in the off-road area.
And,
3,000.
yeah.
So that's Corova and Swan Beach.
That's all the way up from where the off-road starts to the Virginia border. There are 3,000 lots that have, they were platted, I'll just throw the 1960s.
What's
Yeah, that's when they
what's
were-
the size of those lots? 'Cause
Oh,
things that are popping up.
65 or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it varies, the size varies, but they're not very large lots.
No, it's really getting, I'm waiting for that to blow up. It's getting pretty insane out there right now. I can't even go down to my own beach and get a spot to sit if I wanted to catch a little sun. There's that many people now with all the homes popping up. And talk about federal, state, and county, by federal law, my stakes end in the ocean, and I just gotta allow you access back and forth. Really don't allow you to camp there. That's just, so I'm waiting for some up and with that and turn it into a mess one of these days. Plus all the houses, the ones that are still on the beach, we can't get, it's pretty crazy. But yeah, when I saw that building, I said, we're always hold the permits.
Yeah, the off-road area is substantially.
But yeah, when I saw that building, I said, we've gotta have the bulk of the, oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the off-road area is a substantially higher percentage than we've seen.
Now,
period. That's really starting to crank up.
Oh, yeah. So, and a lot of the same worries you have, I'm extremely feeling them right now where we are. You know, what's gonna happen to the whole water source, because we're all well and septic out there. What's gonna happen? What are we doing? And they're still building houses with 25 bedrooms. You know, that's a house. It's like a hotel. So, yeah, it's fascinating. Thank you for doing this,
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, and then the last couple, there's the commercial construction permits. We don't do nearly as many of those, but we're holding steady. We did 84 last year, this fiscal year '23, and 85 in '22. And then lastly,
I'm sorry,
the
Kevin,
yes.
what was the construction permit for April of 2022? It's, I mean,
April.
it's almost 17 million.
Yeah,
What was, I mean, that's a lot.
It is a lot.
that is, and let me find that out for you, because it must be, and you look at the inflated and the average commercial permit value, that number's inflated, because, and I'm racking my brain, but it must have been a large, very large commercial project, so,
Well, look from 21 to 22, commercial, you got 6.6 million total, and then you got 43.8 million in commercial from 21 to 22. That's a huge increase.
Well, I'm sure it was like
I'm trying to think of what large,
Dunkin' Donut building, and what else was right then? The Dollar Family
Generals.
Tree. Family Dollar Tree
There has
thing.
been a bunch of Dollar Generals that have not found and.
Okay, yeah, that's a big increase from one year to the next.
it is. And the last page there, certificates of occupancy, that's a 15 this past year. That's down from 475 in 22 developments going. Overall, we did 415 this past year. That's down from 475 in two. But overall, and you can see in that beach permit top, when again up and rolling for the summer, rationale why it goes up and down. But overall, we've stayed pretty steady. Want to get up and rolling for the summer, and there's rationale why it goes up and down. But overall, we've stayed pretty steady.
Thank you.
Yeah, very neat study.
And as I said, a more formal report is being prepared. It'll have more figures and also some of the questions you're asking as to why certain things are. We're going to try to dive in and figure those out and give some explanations. Like, that's a good one. What happened in 22 in April? What did we permit? Those types of things. So this is just simply for your information. As always, if you have any questions or want to dig in further, yeah, I'm here for it.
That's
So,
what I suspected.
and that's all I have, Chairman.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
All right, we had a motion to adjourn.
I'll second. Does somebody else want to
Did
speak?
somebody want to speak?
I was just gonna make an offhand statement. I'm Jimmy Mills, 106 Chestnut in Buxton. When I came here, the lady mentioned the canoes and kayaks. There was a trail marked from this area here up to the little hump bridge in Moyock. 9 miles. Canoe trail. They had signs up, several signs. And if you go over that, but get on down to the other. I come here, we actually made a move here in June of 73. 50 years ago, last month. But anyway, and there was like 1,400 families in the county, something like that. Not many more or less than that then. Now you look at what's happened to the county in the 50 years. I settled in the buckskin and Sligo and then Currituck, because it was so, you know, we'll live there at this place here. Yeah. Oh, 15 years. And, you know, and I'm down to James there, his daddy, for 2 years. And, she's been dead now 15 years. And, you know, and I'm down to James, the water, and, then the third, there's a lot of changes. But talking about the water problem, back in the, what was it, in the 30s, Roosevelt was president, and they had it, the bottom fell out of the market. Everybody was starving. And so the government started these CC camp things, where all the young boys, they'd round them up and take them out there and work them. They get canals draining the swamp. The NRA, National Rifle, Association, the National Recovery Act, you know, and the Goose Pond, leaving the land out. I grew up down in Alabama, and the place was, I hear these old timers talk about, we lived in Goose Pond. They were talking about we were living in the middle of the swamp. But during the 30s there, the CC camp boys, they dug this humongous canal, or creek, down the creek to the river, and drained that 100 acres or so. You know, and now the last time I went home, I see there was a sign up there in a housing development there that said Goose Pond. I said, yeah, if only the people knew, you know. And you do the same thing, you see the same thing here in Currituck. You know, go down, there all these canals around in the neighborhoods and the houses and everything. They drain the swamp. You get across the best station down there, on the other side of the canal, inland waterway, there's a big ditch there, where they drain that half of the county over there. That's enough said.
I always thought draining the swamp was something about to do with the White House, right, in politics?
All right, so got a motion, got a second? All those in favor for adjournment, say aye.
All right.
Aye. All right, meeting adjourned.